Are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. The March 17th, 2022 hearing for the Planning and Land Development Regulatory Commission is now called to order. Would everyone please silence your phones and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning in the chambers and on the PLDRC webinar. Ms. Cushing, may I please have the roll call?
Of course. Member Feller?
Here.
Young?
Present.
Here. Member Bender?
Here.
Member Costa?
Here.
Member Sixma?
Here.
And Chair Mills absent.
Thank you. We do not have any minutes to consider this morning. For those of you joining us this morning through the webinar, after the staff has presented your case today, and the commissioners have had an opportunity to ask any questions of staff, Ms. Cushing will engage your mics at that time. I will ask you to state your name and address for the record. This will give you an opportunity to add any pertinent information and answer any questions the commissioners may have about your case. If anyone would like to speak for or against any of the cases being heard today, please fill out a form in the back of the chambers and give it to staff to my left. When the case is being heard and it's time for your public participation, I will ask you to come forward so you can be recognized. At that time, I will ask you to give your name, address for the record. For those of you joining us through the webinar, Ms. Cushing will engage your mics so you can be recognized. At that time, I will ask you to give your name and address for the record. This commission has adopted a policy that as long as we are receiving information related to the case and it is not being duplicated, we will not limit you to the 3-minute time limit. But if we start receiving duplicate information from speakers or for information not relevant to the case, we will have no option but to hold you to the 3-minute time limit. After the comments have been heard, I will give the applicant an opportunity to address any concerns the speakers have and answer any questions the commissioners may have. Mr. Sora, would you please give legal comments?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is for the commission and for members of the public that decisions by this body on special exception cases and cases which rezone real property from one classification to another pursuant to the zoning ordinance are recommendations only to the county council and do not constitute a final hearing. So new evidence may be introduced at the county council public hearing. Decisions on variances made by this body constitute final action subject to an appeal on the county council. What this means is that no new evidence may be presented at the time of the county council public hearing on the appeal. So if you are an aggrieved party and that you're appealing such a decision, you're confined to the record made before this body. And hearings by this body on rezoning, special exceptions, and variances are quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that this body is acting more like a court and must take into account all oral, written, or demonstrative evidence presented. And their decisions on these cases must be based on competent substantial evidence on the record. And competent substantial evidence has been defined as that evidence a reasonable mind would accept to support a conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Following legal comments, I would like to ask the commission to disclose for the record any ex parte communications that have occurred before the public hearing that a vote is to be taken on any quasi-judicial matters. Mr. Feller?
None.
Mr. Young?
None.
Ms. Shelley?
None.
Mr. Costa?
Yes, on case V-22-064, under advice of legal counsel, I am recusing myself, and I've submitted a Form 8B, but I will participate in the discussion.
Mr. Sixma?
None.
And I have none. Ms. Shelley, will you read the first case, please?
Excuse me.
Yes, I've got it. Thank you.
Well, hold on.
Oh.
I'm sorry. We
my-
skipped over items to be continued.
Are there any items to be continued?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. This whole stack?
Yes, no. We have case 22, variance 22059 to be continued. It will be continued to the April 21st PLDRC meeting.
22059. Okay, thank you. Now, Ms. Shelley, will you read the first case?
Mr. Chair, can we have a vote to continue that so that we will preserve the notice and that you're making a formal motion to continue to the next item?
Sure, may I have a motion, please?
April 21st.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded to continue this item, 22-059. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, let's try this again. Ms. Shelley, will you read the first case, please?
Is everybody ready? Okay, excuse me. Case number V-21-046, variances to the minimum yard requirements and maximum lot coverage on planned unit development PUD zoned property.
May we have the staff report?
Yes, sir. This variance is in association with a property to be developed in the Spruce Creek Fly-In PUD. It's located at 2621 Slow Flight Drive. It's on the south side of Slow Flight Drive, approximately 100 feet west of its intersection with Wright Drive in the Spruce Creek Fly-In community in Port Orange. The applicants are requesting 4 variances. Variance 1 is to reduce the west front yard from 25 feet to 15.4 feet for a proposed pool and pool enclosure. Variance 2 is to reduce the west front yard from 25 feet to 19.25 feet for a proposed hangar. Variance 3, to reduce the south side yard from 10 feet to 5 feet for a proposed hangar. And variance 4, to the maximum lot coverage from 30% to 31.37%. As you can see, the location of the property on the screen. As I said, it's within the Spruce Creek Fly-In community. The owners want to develop the lot. It's currently vacant. They want to develop it with a single-family home with an attached airplane hangar and a pool and pool enclosure. It's a corner lot, technically. It fronts on Slow Flight Drive to the north, and to the west is a drainage and utility and access easement, which creates another front yard situation. So the applicable setbacks are 25 feet to Slow Flight Drive and 10 feet, they're 25 feet to Slow Flight Drive and the access easement to the west, and then 10 feet to the south and the east property lines. The proposed house meets all the required setbacks, so it's just the hangar and the pool enclosure situation that require variances. In addition, the applicants are requiring a variance to a maximum lot size due to a difference in how to calculate lot coverage between the Spruce Creek PUD development agreement and the county zoning code. So when we analyze the 4 variances, we have to recommend denial as we find that the variances failed to meet one of the 5 criteria. For variance 1 and 2, actually for all the variances, we find that they failed to meet criteria 4, which is it the minimum variance to make reasonable use of the land? But in all cases, we find that they meet all the other 4 criteria. So with regard to variance 1 and 2, which are to reduce the west front yard for the pool enclosure and for the proposed hangar, we do find that there's a unique situation with regard to the property. It's a corner lot, and it does front on the street, Slow Flight Drive, but it also fronts on an access easement. The access easement is adjacent to, can you see? Let me try to draw. This is an access easement over here, and it's an access easement to these. This is an airplane hangar. This as well is an airplane hangar, and this is a natural resource vegetation area. It's about 50 feet in between here. So anyway, that the unique situation is that access easement, and it's an access easement to a airplane hangar condominium. It's used just for the purposes of taxiing planes to the hangar. However, it ends right here in terms of the pavement. This portion of it isn't actually. So the applicants are not responsible for that. We find that literal interpretation of the code may work in an unnecessary hardship. The adjacent easement isn't utilized, and that where the house and the hangar will be is considerably north of the area where the easement ends. So we don't find that it will affect any adjacent residential uses and will not be discernible. So it's unlikely to be injurious to the area involved. With regard to variance 3, it's basically the same situation, but to the south property line. The unique circumstances are that it's adjacent to that NRVA tract, which serves as a buffer between the residential properties on Slow Flight Drive and to that airplane hangar condominium. And the NRVA is about 50 feet wide there. So the proposed hangar will be significantly northward of the airplane hangars. The applicants are not responsible for the shape of the lot or the buffer tract. Literal interpretation of the criteria may work in unnecessary hardship due to the significant natural resource vegetation tract there, and it's unlikely to be injurious to the area involved. With regard to area variance 4, which is regarding maximum lot coverage, the special circumstances are related to the way the HOA Architectural Review Board calculates maximum lot coverage versus how the Volusia County Zoning Code calculates lot coverage. There's actually no definition of how to calculate it in the development agreement, so we have to revert to our code. And additionally, the Spruce Creek PUD requires maximum lot coverage to be 30%, whereas the zoning code for normal, regular residential properties allows up to 35%. So these are the special conditions that we find with regard to this request, and they are not the result of actions by the applicant. Literal interpretation of the situation would deprive them of the ability to build a house that meets the requirements of the Spruce Creek development, PUD. And the zoning code allows a maximum of 35%. The proposed lot is 3.63% less than our standard zoning code would allow. So we don't find it to be injurious to the area involved. We have provided 2 conditions for your consideration should the applicant provide competent and substantial evidence for you to find approval for these variances. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there any, Mr. Young?
Yeah, I would like to know if because she didn't address the comments that the Spruce Creek Property Owners Association mentioned about the pipes and all. Is that a problem? You didn't address those. They had some comments about the front sidewalk sway, there's a pipe there and they may be in a problem and they couldn't approve those types of things. So have you looked at that?
That should be, that will be addressed during the permitting process.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
that was the case. Thank you.
Mr. Feller?
Yeah, so again, I guess mine was that too. We're not dealing with any variances that would deal with vacating any
No, sir.
portion of the west side, okay? And then I do have two other questions, please. Since this is two front yards, if the west side was not considered a front yard, the 10-foot setback, it wouldn't be requiring variance number 2, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. And then you answered the 30%. Excellent, that's my questions. Thank you so much.
Anyone else? Would the applicant please come forward? Give your name and address for the record, please.
Deliver these. For the record, Nika Hosseini at the law firm of Cobb Cole, 231 North Woodland Boulevard in DeLand. Good morning. Honestly, Susan did a great job explaining kind of, why we're here and all of the specific circumstances that relate to this case. When I first started looking at this, I called over Land Development and I said, hey, I'm looking for the Spruce Creek Fly-In Development Agreement. Do you guys have that? Can you just scan that over to me? And they said, you're gonna have to come in. There's about 16 binders we have here full of information. And so that's kind of where it started. And you'll notice that in the staff report, it mentions the fact that there is a letter that says it's a 5-foot side setback. And then after that letter from the county, the standard was 10. And so there's just some discrepancies, and there's been a lot done in this subdivision. And so, it's a little tricky trying to work your way around it. But I think we're at a point where we think that this makes sense in terms of what this site should look like, and a site that won't impact any other neighbors or be injurious to the area. It's actually an ideal site because it's kind of away from everything, and it has, it's pretty nice to have airplane hangars right there if you're going to have an airplane yourself, and then it has a substantial natural buffer easement that will always remain on the backside of that site. So just I'll be brief, but to quickly go over the easements, the first two easements, like Mr. Feller mentioned, we wouldn't be here if there wasn't that west side drainage access and utility easement for the plains. And for the third variance, again, this was a discrepancy between one letter from the county that approved new standards for the subdivision that said 5 feet, and then later on there was a recorded document that said 10 feet. So we think that's a unique circumstance as well. And then finally, the lot coverage. So we went to the HOA board and we talked to them, and they said this is one of the most common requests that they get. When I was looking for other staff reports, I found numerous staff reports that changed the lot coverage. Again, this has to do with the fact that you have the Spruce Creek HOA that has one standard, and because there isn't a standard in the PUD documents, we automatically revert back to how we calculated under the county code, which thereafter causes this discrepancy again. So, Ms. Shelley, like you always say, we want to see variances come in before the fact as they're going through the process and not after the fact. And so, I think if we were here after the fact, that reasonable use criteria would also be met because we'd already have everything done. But we're trying to go about this the right way, kind of inch our way through the process. It has taken us, I think this is one of our oldest variants. It's taken us like 1.5 years, Susan, I think, to get this here because we kept trying to change the plan, make it work, and this is as good as we can get it at this point. So we do think it is a minimum variance to be able to build what we want to build there and also be protective of the neighbors and everything else. So with that, I hope that you guys can review this, and I respectfully request approval of these variances. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Thank you. If we have any public participation, you'll have an opportunity to come back.
Thank you.
Is there any public comments to this case? If not, we're going to close the public hearing and hear discussions amongst the commissioners. What about on the webinar, Ms. Christian?
No, sir.
No. We're going to close the public hearing and have comments from the commission or a motion.
I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve case number V-21-046 with the 2 recommended conditions.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this case. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Ms. Shelley, may we have the second case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-21-102, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on urban mobile home MH5 zoned property.
Thank you. Staff, please.
Good morning. Michael Hansen, Planner 2, Planning Development Services here. Variance case V21-102 is at 167 Charles Street in Edgewater. It's on the north side of Charles Street, approximately 1,680 feet from the intersection with Nellie Street. We're looking at a variance to reduce the minimum yard requirements for the side yard setback from 5 feet to 1.16 feet for the purposes of an accessory structure that was a carport that was built without permits, as the lot itself is conforming to the zoning classification that it has as MH5 zone property, which otherwise the owner purchased the property back in February of 2016, and at the time that they purchased it, it had an existing carport that was permitted back in 1990 and built in 1991 in roughly the same location that the current carport is at. Due to apparent storm damage from Hurricane Irma in September of 2017, the historical carport was no longer really functional. There was panels from the front that were broken off. You can kind of see images on a comparison of the aerial photography that I took in the staff report. However, the owner of the property erected a replacement carport in the same footprint, assuming that because there was a carport there, it was grandfathered in and didn't need permits to do so. This was reported and ended up in code enforcement, which then prompted the need for the variance to the side yard setback, reducing from 5 feet to the 1.16. The carport itself measures 13.6 feet by 30 feet. As you can see on the variance site plan, the property itself kind of canters a little bit to the south, so the closest side of the carport to the adjacent property is at that very north kind of east point that I have the 1.16 foot line drawn to. As is, since it was put up without permits, if the owner would be subject, if this was approved, to after the fact permitting. The recommendation, however, for the variance 1 in this case, to reduce that side yard setback from 1.16, I made a recommendation for denial, noting that it meets 3 of the 5 criteria, and my reason for that was that I did not find any special circumstances particular to the land or the building or the structure that were not applicable to the other lands, buildings, and structures within the same zoning classification. The carport was built in the same location where the current, or as the historical one was. And I did note that there was damage to the historical one from Hurricane Irma. The actions, though, however, as far as criteria 2, were completely those of the owner of the property as far as not getting a permit to put this up. Removal of the carport may create an unnecessary hardship in the case, as the carport did replace one that had been previously permitted in the past, and that this particular property did have a carport in approximately the same configuration for approximately 26 years before it was damaged and then the replacement was built in the same footprint. One thing to note, that the neighboring property, if you take a look on the screen here where there's a view kind of the actual carport touching or coming close to the fence, and the next door property, that was built, looks like approximately in 2016, according to the aerial photography that I did include in the staff report. So at time when it was originally permitted, there was not, it was a vacant property or lot there. So as is right now, there may be contention as far as possible stormwater runoff. Property rights considerations, that's a new piece of our staff reports, is that we thought that this variance implicates consideration 2 of the property rights element, in that the property owner has the ability to improve their property. However, the construction of the carport is subject to the local ordinances, including minimum yard requirements, unless varied by such variance. Staff does not believe that it implicates consideration 1, 3, or 4 in this case. So once again, my recommendation was to deny variance 1, as the variance fails 2 of the 5 criteria for granting said variance. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff, Mr. Feller?
One question, do you know if when it was permitted and built back in 1990, if the setbacks were different back then, or?
In
did they have a
1990,
variance?
from my understanding, we should have still been under the MH5 zoning classification. I did not see a historical variance, however, in the property that would have reduced that side yard setback.
But this was permitted by Volusia County and done in 1990.
That's what I did see a permit for it back in our Amanda system.
Alrighty, thank you so much.
Anyone else? Was there any consideration taken for where this is now, if it's raining and some sort of a gutter on this carport so that the water doesn't go over on the adjacent property? Was that considered?
Not to my knowledge. This is a case that was first brought to our attention back in 2021, and about a year ago to date, where I recently inherited after starting with the county. So I did make the same thought process that you had with that as far as stormwater. So from my knowledge, there hasn't been any consideration as far as guttering the carport as far as stormwater management purposes.
Is there something that this board can do in the decision making if this passes that can require them to put some sort of a gutter to make sure that the water is maintained on their site?
I'm not a lawyer, but I think under Robert's rules you could make an amendment to your motion to create a condition so that you could force the applicant to put a gutter onto the carport.
Mr. Chair, if you recall, one of the variances you had a few months ago has a similar situation with a shed that was too close to the property line, and this commission approved it with a condition that the property owner must, attenuate the stormwater somehow, work it out with their neighbor, however they need to. To make sure that they are not dumping stormwater inappropriately on their neighbor's yard. So yes, that is a condition you can put on. Historically, the commission has recently put that same condition when granting a variance, because you are allowing a structure, inside the setback where no structure should be there. So you can take that into account as a mitigating factor if the commission chooses to grant this variance.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, I'll just make one more comment. Just
Mr. Sixman.
looking at the angle, there's definitely a water problem as far as blowing off in the neighbor's yard over there, so just making that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant please come forward and give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good morning, I'm Michael Watuniak with Engineered Permits Inc. at 311 South Woodland Boulevard. I'm here representing Mrs. Bria. To answer your initial question, I've been working with Ms. Bria for a long time, initially on a seawall, and now, yes, the carport was replaced, and to be a good neighbor, we have no issue adding a gutter along that side, and I know there was some I actually spoke to the one neighbor, Mr. Matliff, or whatever the neighbor's name is. There are two brothers on either side, and I know he had indicated there was some potential water coming on his property, and my recommendation would actually to have Ms. Bria add a gutter along that side. But the carport was put back in the same spot, and I actually included in the variance application some photos. You can see where the old feet used to be. So it wasn't like we kind of just added a blue. And I also added photos, because in this particular area, up and down all those streets, everybody, like it or not, has carports, and they're 50-foot wide lots. You put a home on there, there's no room left. With that, I just have, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Is there any question for the applicant? Mr. Feller?
So you did this carport, the new carport?
No, sir, I did not.
No, you did not do it. Would you be doing the gutter, or is that something that you?
I would just recommend it. She used a real, aluminum company.
Okay. All righty, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. We will open it up for public participation and
Sure.
call you back for a rebuttal if you need. I have one request here from Mr. John Matlet. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. If you come up, sir, give your name and address for the record and any comments that you may have.
Okay. Good morning. My name is John Matlat. I live at 169 Charles Street, and the carport is right next to my house. And my complaint is they're looking for a variance. If the permits were properly filed, this structure would never have been, it would have been denied that for not meeting county codes. The carport is inches from my property. Property fencing, effectively making this carport, makes it look like a garage. And rainwater from this carport comes on my property side yard. Water from the roof cascades onto the fence. Carport is connected to the house, which makes, when it rainwater coming off the carport even worse, because you got to come off the house and then hit the carport and come down. County code calls for a 5-foot side yard setback for structures. We have properties that are 50 feet wide. Which we have neighbors' structures inches from our property. I mean, it just makes it look, it's not right. And we have county codes to prevent it. And I have some photographs here of some of the
If you would
carport
give
stuff.
them to staff, and do realize now you're not going to get those back. They
Yes,
will
I
be put in a
understand that,
permanent
sir.
record. So if you would give them to staff to my left, please.
Okay. Okay, with that said, we respectfully request that the variance be denied and the carport meet county codes.
Is there any question, Mr. Young?
Yes, he said that the carport was there before the storm. Is it the same? How long have you lived there, sir?
We're there about 4 years now.
Was that carport, the old carport, like this one?
That carport was similar, but not, there was nothing there on the property. I mean, it's like, there was an old house there. My brother and I bought the property, I don't know, probably about
No, I'm saying this carport that he built, is it like it was before?
It seems a little taller to me.
But then these existing conditions were there before.
I don't think so, no.
In other words, the water didn't run over
Saw a lot of water coming into the side property. Now that this new carport is on,
and the carport was as close to the fence as it is now? With the old one?
fairly close to the property line, yes.
Okay, so it's basically somewhat similar to what was already there before you even moved in?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I do have a quick question. The fence in the pictures, is that your fence or her fence?
That's my fence.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this case? How about
Yes, sir. Mr. Mike Matlet is online and would wish to speak. Mr. Matlet, if you can unmute your mic. Mr. Matlet, you can go ahead and speak now.
Mr. Mallett, can you hear? We have, we're gonna move on based on the fact that Mr. Matlick is not responding. Is there anyone else online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir. And Mr. Matlet, your microphone is unmuted. You would have to unmute it now from your side in order to speak. If we're unable to hear you, we will have to move forward.
Okay, we're gonna close the public hearing at this time and open up comments or, well,
Bring the applicant back up to
okay, can the applicant please come back? Would you like to respond to the comments
Yes,
that you heard?
just to answer one additional question. The carport is the same configuration, same size, and it's always attached to the same side of the house. It's not any higher, it's not any larger. And in the photos that are in your staff report, you can actually see the old feet, so it didn't expand its size. It just was replaced its size for size
All right.
and height-wise.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Okay, we're gonna close the public hearing at this time and open it up for commission comments or a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we,
Excuse me, just a second, Mr. Young, before you do that. I would like for the record to be recognized that we do have a number of responses here from neighbors in objection to this
I'm not
case.
sure that in reading through the responses, they're dealing from my reading of what came in as to a totally separate issue. There might be a couple of comments in here, but in their comments, but when I read through them, it's mostly dealing with something that does not have to do with the call.
Right, I just wanted to recognize that these things were here. Would you go on with your motion, please?
yeah, I'd make a motion since it had been there before, and my comment is, and it looks like it's the only problem I see with it at this point is the drainage. So I make a motion that we approve this with another condition, that would be a fifth that we add a requirement that there be a drainage down somehow, a guttering down the side of it to prevent the water from flowing into the neighbor's lot.
I'd second that motion.
It's been moved by Mr. Young, second by Mr. Feller, to approve this case with the addition of one more requirement that they have a gutter of some sort added as a requirement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, we have 5, 4, and one against, being Mr. Sixma. Thank you. Ms. Selig, may we have the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-22-044, variances to separate non-conforming lots and to the minimum yard requirements on prime agricultural A1 zoned property.
Thank you. Staff, Ms.
Yes,
Jackson?
yes, sir. This property is located at 1090 Hogsback Road in the Lake Helen area. It's on the west side of Hogsback Road, approximately 345 feet south of its intersection with Ramsey Acres Lane. There are 4 variances being requested, and it's in order to facilitate the replacement of an existing mobile home and to legitimize the location of existing structures on the property. So the 4 variances, one is to separate the parcel from 4 adjoining parcels, as you can see on the aerial photograph over here. Variance 2 is to reduce the front yard from 100 feet to 88 feet for the replacement of the existing mobile home. Variance 3 is to reduce the front yard from 100 feet to 95 feet for an existing garage. Variance 4 is to reduce the front yard from 100 feet to 62.2 feet for an existing carport. So the history of this property is that in 1990, a mobile home was erected on the property. I can't find record of permit, but it's been there since 1990. In 2017, the home was damaged by Hurricane Irma. It's been identified by the Rebuild Florida Housing Repair and Replacement Program. It's been found eligible for replacement. This is a grant program that uses federal funding for recovery efforts from natural disasters, and it's overseen by the Department of Economic Opportunity, and it's geared towards assisting income-eligible property owners whose homes have incurred significant damage. So the agency is working with a homeowner and a local contractor to remove the existing home and replace it with a new mobile home. So during the permitting process, it was discovered that it didn't meet setbacks, and there were some other issues with regards to the lot. For example, that it was a non-conforming lot, and we needed to go through this variance to separate the lot situation. So with regard to variance 1 to separate the parcels, the property's A1, and as you know, A1 requires 10 acres. This property is approximately 2.5 acres. Between 1992 and 2003, there was common ownership, at least with this parcel, going back here, with this parcel 31 over here. But when they submitted a non-conforming lot letter that certifies if it had common ownership, it was like this thick and it was really hard to determine. So in an abundance of caution, we've added in these other parcels to ensure that if this variance is granted, it will be a standalone parcel, lawful non-conforming parcel. Variance 2 is to replace the mobile home. The front yard, we are considering the front yard is Hogsback Road here. In A1, it requires 100 feet. The existing home is at 88 feet. They plan to put the replacement home at the exact same location in order to be able to utilize the existing well and septic system. So we're asking for the 88 feet for the replacement mobile home. The existing garage is at 95 feet, and so the owners desire to retain the garage and reattach it to the new mobile home. In order to do so, we need a variance to allow it to be 95 feet from the property line. And the existing carport, it's the same situation. They'd like to be able to reinstall that carport in its current location, and it also requires a variance in order to do so. So when we analyze all of these variances, we find that they successfully meet all 5 criteria for granting the variances. We find that there are unique circumstances with regard to the property. It was actually created in 1978 by a previous owner, the lot split it was. And there was common ownership prior to the current property owner's purchase or acquisition of it in 2003. So the current owner is not responsible for the subdivision of the property or the previous common ownership. The property has had a mobile home on it since 1990. Literal interpretation of the zoning code would deprive the owner of the ability to permit a replacement mobile home on the property and in the same location. This is the minimum variance that will allow the issuance of a permit for the replacement mobile home. And we don't find it to be injurious to the area. The lot has existed for over 40 years, and the house has existed for a very long time, and so we don't find it to be injurious to the area. It's the same basic answers for the setback requirements, again, the unique circumstances and the current disrepair due to Hurricane Irma. These are not situations that are the fault of the applicant. Again, they're the minimum variances to allow these accessory structures to be replaced in their current locations, and we don't find them to be injurious to the area involved. They've been there for about 30 years without complaint. We have provided 4 conditions along with our approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Do we have any questions for staff? The applicant present. Would you come forward, give your name and address for the record, please?
Ira Wayne Patterson, 1090 Hogsback Road, Lake Ellen, Florida.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you would like this commission to hear before making a decision?
No, sir, not really.
Okay. Thank you so much. If there's anyone that speaks for or against it and you feel a need to come back and rebut it, we will give you that opportunity, sir.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I'd like to ask him one thing. Did you get to review the 4 conditions?
Did I what?
There was, what, 4 conditions for,
Yes, there's 4 conditions in the staff report that we sent you, and they're also up on the screen there. Are you okay with those conditions?
Yes.
okay.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to speak to this case? Online, Ms. Cushing? Do we
There
have
is one
anyone?
person online, but they do not wish to speak.
Thank you. We're going to close the public hearing now for.
Mr. Chair, just a question for Susan. Is variance number 4 appropriate because they are working with a state grant entity? So can they get permits within 180 days?
Good question. They may not be able to, so we can extend that time period. I would recommend that we do extend that time period just because, number one, it's taking a long time to get permits anyway because of COVID and the backup, supply chain backup, but also because it is a state agency and there's several, we just don't know what we'll be facing. If we could extend that time period to maybe 1 year.
1 year.
I only have one comment if no other commissioners have anything. I'm concerned about variance number 4, approving that, since there's a note in the staff report that carport is going to be moved and then put back into its existing place. If there's some place on this site that can take this, that would be conforming without a variance, it's going to be moved anyway, so why not move it and make it a conforming instead of having a variance for it, especially if it's not going to be affecting any wetlands on the property.
Susan, can you speak a little bit about that program? Do they replace like for like and keep the same building permit?
No, my understanding is that they simply replace the mobile home structure. It would be up to the applicant to permit and replace any accessory structures, so that would be the garage and the carport that they wish to do. And I do understand that there are other locations on this property where it could meet setbacks. However, I would point out that it's been there for many, many years in its current location. And if you can, if you look at the aerial that's showing on the screen, it's over here and it's quite a distance from the property line. There are trees along here, and you know, it's the A1 classification requires 100-foot. A normal 2.5 acre property would require considerably less of a setback.
Do you know if that structure has a concrete pour under it, under the carport?
I do not know.
Does it have a? Oh, that makes a big difference.
Okay.
The
Well,
applicant is shaking his head. No, just for the record.
My concern was that it's being moved anyway, I guess, to allow whatever's going to be replacing the new mobile home and then put back in its place. If it wasn't being disturbed and moved from where it is, you know, I wouldn't have an issue with it, but my issue was, if you're gonna pick it up and move it anyway and then take it and put it right back where it is, what's the complication with moving it to someplace where it's,
I'm not an expert, but just looking at the pictures, my assumption is that this carport is actually attached to the mobile home, so that relocating it would only be a three-legged animal.
Right.
And it would not stand on its own at that point.
That's what I was wondering, if it was,
if
if it's
Is
attached.
that the case? Is this actually attached to the mobile home that's there now? It's not attached.
It's
So-
got 4 legs then?
What would the, can you come back up to the?
Yeah, could you? Thank you.
It's my understanding that the Rebuild Florida program has to move the carport in order to get the new mobile home in. But if not, we would be here, they wouldn't be moving it, and we'd be here requesting a variance to legitimize its existing location.
I understand that, but like I said, my only concern is if it's going to be moved anyway, we're not putting them through anything that they're not already going through. It's going to be picked up, so why not just pick it up and put it someplace where it's not requiring a variance to be? What's the complication, sir, of moving that? If you had to move that to a different location, what does that do to you?
Some of the places are real wet when you get a real big rain, so if you're going into them, you know, like if you're going on through the side of the house, you'd probably get stuck trying to get in there.
Okay, so that's an issue for you then.
Right.
And that's why I kind of need to go back where it is.
Right. Because when they first did it, they put a bunch of shell rock or whatever, you know, going into that to where you don't deal with the getting stuck problem.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Feller?
Just one question. What is the gray line, and staff, what does the gray line represent on the variance site plan?
This dashed line, it's my understanding that's a wetlands
A
line.
wetlands, and so, yeah, so any moving of it over to that way would potentially put it towards wetlands as well, too, which we would have wetland setbacks at that point, correct?
Yeah, you can see on the aerial.
Yeah, that's all
This
wetlands.
whole area is very wet.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I concur that putting it there would probably just give us a different animal that we'd be looking at that point.
All right, thank you, sir. Well, that satisfies my concern that we see that there's an actual need to put it back where it is, because it's going to cause them some difficulties going forward. So the floor is open for a motion or further comment.
Make a motion, Mr. Chair. Make a motion that we approve case number V-22-044 with the 4 staff recommended conditions and modifying condition number 4 to read 365 days.
Second.
Second. Okay.
It's been moved and seconded by, moved by Mr. Costa, second by Ms. Shelley, to approve with the 4 conditions, changing 180 days to 365 days. And number 4, all in favor of, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Shelley, may we have the next case, please?
Yes, sir. Case number V-22-058, a variance to minimum setback requirements for a dock on Resource Corridor, RC, and urban single-family residential R3 zoned property.
Thank you. Let's see, Ms. Jackson.
Yes, sir. This property is located at 4022 South Peninsula Drive in Port Orange. It's on the west side of South Peninsula Drive at the northwest corner of its intersection with Heron Street. The applicant's requesting 1 variance. It's to reduce the minimum setback from 15 feet to 5.3 feet to the north property line extension for a dock. A little bit of background. The property does contain a single-family home constructed in 1971 and a dock, and that dock extends approximately 230 feet into the intercoastal. In March of 2021, a previous owner was issued a notice of violation for expanding the dock without a permit. A new owner has purchased the property and they want to rectify the situation by obtaining a permit for this existing dock. County records show that in 2005, a dock was originally permitted on this property. However, there are no records of any variances. And when it was permitted, it looked pretty much exactly the way it does now, except for it didn't contain these 2 finger piers here. Let me see if I could get a drawing tool. That doesn't work. There's a finger pier here and a finger pier here. Those were recently added, and that's what the notice of violation, what triggered that to occur. But the dock has been in this configuration without those finger piers since it was built. And it appears that the reason it angles this way is that if you look up here at this aerial, there's mangroves here, and although the dock starts out on the shoreline at meeting the setback at about 18 feet from the property line, as it angles this way to avoid impacting those mangrove, at about the 60-foot mark, it meets the 15 feet, and then from there, it keeps angling to the point where we need to request a variance out here. And it has to be this deep in order to have it be deep enough to moor a boat. So when we review these variances, we find that we can recommend approval as we find that it meets all 5 criteria. The unique circumstances are the dock was previously permitted with the same setback encroachment in 2014, and the presence of mangroves, and they're trying to avoid those on the south side is likely the reason that the dock does angle toward the north. The applicant is not responsible for these circumstances. Literal interpretation of the code would require approximately 170 feet of the dock be removed to a point where it does meet setbacks, and that might be considered an undue hardship, as it would not reach deep enough water to be able to moor a boat beside it. This is the minimum variance to allow the new owner to obtain a building permit for the dock, and we consider this unlikely to be injurious to the area. The dock has existed since approximately 2006 at the same length and angle. It was last permitted in 2014. The addition of the finger piers at the end of the dock do not encroach further into the setback than the previous dock did, and we also find that they will encourage a boat to park between them, which is on the opposite side of the encroachment and should not be interfering with the neighbor's dock. And then further, looking at these aerials, you'll see most of the docks do angle this way and that. They all extend out generally the same distance. They aren't all impacted by a mangrove situation on their lot. But with that, staff does recommend approval of this variance, and we have provided 1 condition for your consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Phillip?
I do have one question. I understand you're saying that the fingers do not encroach into the setback, they're the other way. But if they were going to build those today, that would require a permit, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are we not making a condition of this to have this be after the fact permitted? Just because it's been an addition? I mean, obviously it's something we can talk about, but
well, they have to do that to rectify the notice of violation. We can add it as a condition, but that's how they will cure the violation.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present? Would you give your name and address for the record, please?
William Strauss, 4022 South Peninsula Drive. My wife and I recently purchased the property, knowing we were facing this. We purchased it off Mr. Miller here. He told me he was going to help me through this. I retained a reputable dock company to rectify all the permitting and stuff. It would be bad if I couldn't have it because I got a boat. I've recently moved here from Charleston, South Carolina, and I agree with what the staff report says, and be happy to comply with whatever you guys say. So,
Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Welcome to Florida.
Okay, if we need you, we'll call you back, sir. Thank you. Is there any one in the chambers that would like to speak to this case? Ms. Cushing, is there anyone online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for comments from the commission or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve variance number V-22-058 with the one staff recommended condition.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded, moved by Mr. Costa, second by Ms. Shelley, to approve V-22-058. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Shelley, may we have the next case, please? Well, the next case is V-22-059, which has been continued to April 21st. So if we can have 22-061, please.
Yes, sir. Case number V-22-061, variances to separate non-conforming lots and to the dock regulations for a dock on Resource Corridor RC and Urban Single Family Residential R3 zoned property.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Wait a minute. Did I read the same one? Oh, that was, never mind. We have two of them, the revised and the.
Yes, this, you have been given a revised
Yes, I have the
staff
revised.
report for this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I made a few errors in my calculations in the first staff report and corrected them. And that's what's before you now and what we're going to be considering. So there are, this property is located at 4022 South Peninsula Drive, Port Orange. It's on the west side of South Peninsula Drive, approximately 230 feet north of its intersection with Heron Drive. This area is having dock issues lately. So there's 4 variances associated with this. The first variance is to separate the subject property from a property on the other side of the street. It's also variance 2 is to increase the maximum allowed dock size from 750 square feet to 930 square feet. Variance 3 is to reduce the minimum setback from 15 feet to 6 feet on the north side property line extension. And variance 4 is to reduce the minimum setback from 15 feet to 4.5 feet on the south side property line extension. So the property contains a single-family home constructed in 1985 and the dock that extends approximately 210 feet into the water. In August of 2021, the owner received a notice of violation for rebuilding the dock, the existing dock, without a permit. And so to resolve the violation, the owner is here before you to request variances in order to be able to submit for a building permit and rectify the notice of violation. So according to the applicant, the dock has been in place for approximately 36 years. It was constructed by a previous owner. And due to the age and deterioration, the owner contracted with a dock builder to have some of the pilings replaced, and when that was occurring, the existing boathouse roof collapsed. So now they are trying to permit a boathouse that is actually less large. It's slightly smaller than the original structure. Altogether, the original structure was 1,116 square feet. Altogether, the proposed structure is 930 square feet. It includes the boathouse and a platform on the north side of the dock, And let me do this so you can see it. The boathouse is this clear area, and the platform on the north side, this all equals 960 square feet. And then this platform on the south side, which equals 270 square feet, for a total of 930. So when we evaluate the variances, we find that we can approve variance 1 as we find it successfully meets all 5 criteria. In 1984, a previous owner owned both the subject property and the property across the street on the other side of Peninsula Drive. The property has changed ownerships 5 times since it was originally owned in common, and both properties are developed with a single-family house. The current owners are not responsible for this condition. Literal interpretation of the code would require that the properties be combined, but they can't be combined because they're both developed, and so it does create an unnecessary hardship. It is the minimum variance to allow the lot to be considered a lawful non-conforming lot that is eligible for building permits, and we don't find that granting this variance will be injurious to the area. The properties have been separately owned since 1985. With regard to variance 2, 3, and 4, we have to recommend denial, as we find that it fails to meet one of the criteria. They all 3 fail to meet criteria 2, but we do find that they meet all other criteria. We do find that there are unique circumstances. The original dock was permitted in 1984, and the oldest photographs available show the boathouse was in place in 1999. The current owners didn't purchase the property until 2002, and so they are not responsible for the original dock or the boathouse. However, the platform does appear in first aerial photographs in 2006, so they are responsible for the expansion of the dock, and there are no records of permits for this expansion. Literal interpretation of the code may be an undue hardship. It would require modification to meet the 15-foot setback, and it would be difficult to remove the boathouse. It wouldn't be a large enough size to actually fit a boat in if they were able to meet that setback. We don't find that granting these variances will likely be injurious to the area involved. If you can see in the aerial over here, the dock is very similar to all the docks around it. It's not necessarily any larger, and they all appear to be very close. This, just a few docks down, was the variance you just heard. And so based on what the other docks look like in the area, and that it's been in place as it is now for many years, we find that it's not out of character with the area and unlikely to be injurious to the area. So with that, staff does recommend denial based on it not meeting criteria 2, but we do find it meets all other criteria. I'm happy to answer any questions. We have provided one condition for consideration should you choose to find that you can approve this variance.
Are there any questions for staff? Thank you. Is the owner or the applicant present? Would you come forward, please, and give your name and address for the record?
When I'm pretty good, it gives me a minute, so.
Take your time, sir. We're good.
Good morning. My name is Chip Steele. I live at 1710 Weeping Elm Circle, Port Orange, Florida, 32128. I'm here representing Coastal Waterway Services and Mr. Ponzo, the owner of the property. First of all, I'd like to thank Susan. She did a great job putting together the package and the revisions. It's a fair and complete report. It's representative of the owner's property and the violations. I think she spoke to variance 1. It's an upland issue. We have nothing to do with it, and I believe they reconciled that just fine. Starting with variance 2. As pointed out in the staff report, the boathouse roof collapsed while attempting to replace the pile and deteriorating pilings. The repair and replacement effort was not permitted and led to a stop work pending a building permit. Coastal Waterway Services was contacted to address this violation. A variance application, drawings, and package was prepared and submitted to the county. As noted in the report, the replacement boathouse is slightly smaller than the original boathouse, thus reducing the total square footage minimally and increasing the northern setback. As pointed out in the report, this dock structure, footprint if you will, has remained unchanged for at least 16 years, and I have some photographs that say maybe 30. It is the same footprint except smaller. The 750 square foot criteria that we're in violation of came about in 2012. It was a revision to the dock code, which I fully applaud. It was a great idea, implemented and adhered to often. In this case here, our dock is 930 square feet, considerably larger, but it has been considerably larger well prior to this code. I would like you to consider the fact that it has been there that long. Let me address variances 3 and 4 as the same, with the same response. They're both dealing with setback, just north and south side. Since these are both setback issues, it is previously stated in reports the northern setback was 3.7 feet. It has increased to 6 feet, smaller boathouse. The southern setback had revised from 4.34 feet to 4.5 feet. Minimal change. It was a survey issue. Although neither of these setbacks remotely comply with the code criteria, I would offer 2 observations for your consideration. The county code does not take into consideration side setbacks when addressing narrow properties such as 50 feet wide. I will offer an example. The State Department of Environmental Protection does recognize narrow lots, 65 feet or less. They require you to put the structure centered on the property. They defer setback to local criteria. It's sort of a cop-out on their point, but that's how it works. They want it centered. It can be down to 0 feet as long as it doesn't go over. Some of the cities in Volusia County have adopted similar things where they say, center up the structure. We know 50 feet is a narrow place. You just heard a case just prior to this. Additionally, although the code did not, let me start again. Although not in the code, but perhaps more importantly, it was also pointed out in the prior case, the distance between the structures is far more important than the setback from the property line. In our case, although we're only 6 feet from the north property line, we are 19 feet from the adjacent structure. On the south side, we're 4.5 feet from the property line, but we are 16 feet from the adjacent structure. Both of these distances allow for safe passage between the docks. There's small vessels in that area anyhow. Safe passage between the docks are not a navigational issue, but more importantly, I am not aware of any neighboring complaints of encroachment ever. As you've seen in the aerials, all these docks are very similar. Mr. Ponzo looks forward to completing his repair, replacement, legally making restitution as required. I think staff pointed out, and I will remind you that in the report, we are not contrary to public interest. It is not a result of the applicant's, he built without a permit, no question there. But the size was never an issue. And he enjoys the same property rights as the other 25 houses in that area. With that, I request that you approve all the variances.
Do we have Mr. Feller?
I have a few for you, questions. Can I get clarification on the platform, which is the 270 square foot? Staff said that it was showing about 2006 that was done. And that was done by the current owner?
Correct. That platform was there when he had, well, Steph and I may disagree a little bit, but the platform, I believe, was there when he purchased the property in 2002. I became in possession of a photo. Back of the photo says, "Congrats on your new dock, Bob 9101." We don't know who Bob is, but we do have a picture of the platform.
If you want us to take that into consideration, we're going to ask that you give it to staff and realize that you're not going to get it back. It's going to become a part of the permanent record.
Belongs to Bob. I don't need it back. Okay, that's fine.
I'd like to see that, and then I do have one more question when you're done.
You want me to go this way or?
Yeah, she'll take it, and then they'll pass it around. Thank you. Thank you. And while you're walking up, I'll say, it's not so much a question that I'd like to say, but when you were talking about the same rights as other property owners, kind of the same thing that we talked about before, if these variances are granted, then it gives your neighboring properties the same rights to ask for variances. So the distance between the 19-foot north neighbor and the 16-foot south neighbor could all meet if they requested a variance to go to 4 feet. I'm just saying, in a grand scheme of things, what we grant for one property can hold what,
I completely agree, but I might add that had Coastal Water Services been notified initially, we would have prepared a package and addressed the variance issues at that time. If the neighboring property wanted to expand their docks, they would have to get a permit. We're doing an after-the-fact thing, so we're actually asking for forgiveness for something that has existed 30 years. We're not trying to expand our structure at all.
Absolutely understand. I was just simply making that point.
No, I understand.
And I will say, having that picture does show that, contrary to what was said, that platform did exist pre-2000, at least in 2001. And you said this owner purchased the property in 2002, correct?
Correct.
So
And respect for Susan, she was not aware of this photo.
No.
It just came to us.
We have no better staff, I guarantee you that. It was just, I just wanted to clarify on that. So thank you for making those clarifications for me.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. We will call you back if necessary.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to speak to this case? Anyone online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir.
All right, at this time, we're going to close the public hearing for commission comments or a motion.
I'll be prepared to make a motion. In case V22-061, I recommend that we approve variances 1 through 4 with the, I believe it's one staff recommended condition.
I'll second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Moved by Mr. Feller, second by Mr. Costa to approve V22-061. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's approved unanimously. Ms. Shelley, may we have the next case, please?
Yes, sir. V-22-062, variances to the minimum yard requirements and accessory dwelling unit regulations on prime agricultural A1 and rural mobile home MH3 zoned property.
Ms. Jackson.
Yes, sir. This is not a variance for a dock. This property is located at 3741 State Road 44 in New Smyrna Beach area. It's on the north side of State Road 44, approximately 1/4 mile east of its intersection with Cucumber Lane. There are 3 variances being requested. The first variance is to reduce the front yard setback from 100 feet to 79.8 feet for an existing single-family residence. Variance 2 is to permit an accessory dwelling unit to be located forward of a principal dwelling unit. Variance 3 is to permit an accessory dwelling unit to exceed 50% the square footage of a principal dwelling. And I would like to note that this variance 3 is anticipated to be extinguished when one of the homes is replaced. So this parcel is approximately 8.82 acres in size, and it is split zoned A1 and MH3. It is a lawful non-conforming lot. It contains a 708 square foot house that was built in 1930 on the western portion that is zoned A1, and a 960 square foot mobile home dwelling that was built in 1974 on the eastern MH3 portion of the lot. So new owners have purchased the property, and they want to retain both of the dwelling units on it, but they're right now unable to obtain insurance or a mortgage for the property due to the age and condition of the mobile home. Their intent is to replace that mobile home. But in the meantime, what they're wanting to do is to be able to maintain both homes on the property. In order to do so, one has to be designated as an accessory dwelling unit. So the smaller of the two, what they call the cottage, the one that was built in 1930, that is the one that will be assigned the accessory dwelling unit, and the other as the principal, for two reasons. One, because it is smaller, and two, because you cannot have a mobile home as an accessory dwelling unit unless the principal is also accessory dwelling unit. So in this case, that's not the case. So with regard to variance 1, to reduce the front yard setback from 100 feet to 79.8 feet for the existing, what we're going to call the cottage, 708 square feet. Again, built in 1930, probably prior to any zoning regulation, and it's very likely that State Road 44 probably wasn't even paved, who knows. And so since that time, we've adopted zoning regulations. We've also taken additional right-of-way from that property. So this variance is to legitimize the existing location of that 1930 house. Variance 2 is to permit the accessory dwelling unit to be located forward of the principal dwelling unit. The mobile home sits back further on the property than the cottage does, and our accessory dwelling unit regulations require that the accessory dwelling unit sit rearward of the principal, and in this case, that wouldn't be how they're placed on the property. And when they replace the mobile home in the future, they want to put it in the same place to take advantage of the existing well and septic, so it will still be in this configuration. Variance 3 is required because currently the cottage is approximately 73% the size of the principal, and our ADU regulations require that it be no more than 50% the size of the principal. They do plan on replacing the mobile home with a home that will allow the accessory dwelling unit to be 50%, but in the meantime, this variance is being requested so that they can consider one a primary, one an accessory, and meet our code. So when we analyze these variances, we find that they all successfully meet the 5 criteria, and therefore we can recommend approval. The unique circumstances with regard to variance 1 are the cottage was built in 1930 prior to zoning regs and the widening of 44, and the current owners are not responsible for these circumstances. Literal interpretation of the code would cause unnecessary hardship. It would require either the house to be removed or moved on the property, and it's been located as it is for 91 years. It is the minimum variance that will allow the dwelling to remain as it's currently located, and we don't find it to be injurious to the area can't be seen from State Road 44. There's a lot of dense vegetation and trees in that area. Variance 2, to permit the accessory dwelling unit to be located forward of the principal. Again, the unique circumstances are that the property has maintained 2 homes since 1974, and the current owners are not responsible. Literal interpretation would require one of the houses to be removed from the property or moved back on the property. And again, both homes have been on the property since 1974. It's the minimum variance to allow the smaller dwelling unit to be considered the accessory dwelling. And it will not be injurious to the area. It's very well shielded from view from State Road 44 or from any neighboring properties. As to variance 3, to permit the accessory dwelling unit to exceed 50%. Again, the unique circumstances in that the 2 homes have been on the property since 1974, and to retain both houses on the property, one has to be designated as a principal and one as accessory. The current owners are not responsible for these conditions. Literal interpretation would cause an unnecessary hardship. It would require the cottage to be reduced to 480 square feet. So it would require renovations. And the owners intend to replace the principal with a new mobile home that will be large enough to allow the cottage to meet the 50% criteria. It's the minimum to allow the existing accessory dwelling to temporarily exceed the size limitation, and we don't find that granting this variance to be injurious to the area. It is intended to be extinguished. We have recommended 2 conditions for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? If there are none, is the applicant present? And would you come forward, give your name and address for the record, please?
Hi, good morning. I'm Jennifer Bronard. I live at 3741 State Road 44. Ms. Jackson stated our case clearly, and as the new caretakers of this property, we're only asking that we are given the opportunity to put our property into compliance.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to speak to this case? Ms. Cushing, is there anyone online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir.
Thank you. We're now going to close the public hearing for commission comments or a motion, please.
I'd like to comment before we make a motion here, but it's just something, we're neighbors. I'm right down the way from you. I know the area. We heard there's 2 things, two variances about accessory dwelling units, and I think this is coming back to bear. When my first hearing, we passed the ADU, and I think there was some things in there. Properties like this that have good opportunities for ADUs are going to be coming in front of this board more, and I think Mr. Costa said this when we were first going over this, with regards to the location of it and the size of it, and I'm glad we did the 50%, but I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So, you know, when you look at an 8-acre property to consider the accessory dwelling unit having to be behind the rear of the front principal, I think it's going to be something we're going to see a lot of. So I say that just for our comments on this.
Okay, thank you.
You know, I do have a question for the applicant after all.
Would you come back to the podium, please?
Yes, sir.
And the question is because of the way that you wrote in the petition. You call one the home and the other one a cottage, correct?
Correct.
And so we're giving temporary status to what's there to be replaced in the future date?
Correct.
Well, so on the screen here, this is what is referred to as the cottage. It's the 780 square foot stick-built home. This is the mobile home, and this is what is considered the principal, and it will be replaced in the future with a home that will allow this to be 50%, the size of the new mobile home.
But we'll have 2 separate dwellings on the same property?
Yes.
Okay.
But one would be a legal ADU, correct?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Costa. One would be, under the current terms, if they were to build the mobile home at 2 times the current cottage size, it would be a legal ADU except for the location, which where the variance is gonna be, that one variance would continue, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The intent of 2 dwellings on the same property are?
I don't
Your
understand.
intent with, to having the 2 dwellings on the same property?
Is to live there? I don't understand the question.
Well, you have 2 homes. You're gonna have 2 homes on the same property.
Correct.
They exist currently.
Currently.
Yes, they're
Right.
there. They've been there since 1974.
It's all family that lives on the property?
Got it, okay. All right, so extended family kind of,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Can I
Be
make
glad to
one?
make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Shelley?
I move that item number V-22-062 be approved, subject to staff comments and conditions.
Second it.
It's been properly moved by Ms. Shelley, seconded by Mr. Feller, to approve V-22-062. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Shelley?
Yes, sir. Case number PUD-22-063. A rezoning of approximately, rezoning from the light industrial classification to the planned unit development PUD zoning classification.
Yeah, let's see, that is, Ms. Smith.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is a rezoning from light industrial to planned unit development. The project is on the north side of 92, just west of I-4. The applicant is building a mini storage and an office space. This is allowed by right in the light industrial zoning classification. And normally this development would go straight through the final site plan process. It did that last fall and was stopped and returned to planning because of a condition in our comp plan, the High Ridge local plan, that does require any property over 1 acre that's undeveloped to be done through a PUD process. This is an undeveloped 6-acre parcel. It's surrounded by industrial and commercial land uses and some non-conforming residential uses. It's on the county thoroughfare overlay network and the city of Daytona Beach Gateway area as well, and that just means it's subject to additional setbacks and landscaping and signage requirements. It also is subject to non-residential design standards for industrial sites in the county's code. So the main changes for this document are the front yard setback will be 50 feet instead of 30 feet. The maximum lot coverage will be limited to 30% instead of the typical industrial no maximum. The maximum height will be 35 feet instead of 45 feet. And the landscape buffer in the front will be 35 feet, which is what our thoroughfare requirement is. And you may have noticed a new clause on property rights in our reports. We did consider the property rights in this case and their right to build in the I-1 zoning classification, and we do recommend that the PLDRC forward this to the county council with a recommendation of approval. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any questions for staff? Thank you. Is the applicant present? Would you give your name and address for the record, please?
Good morning. I'm Kimberly Buck with the Allen Engineering Group, representing the owner. Address is 880 Airport Road, Ormond Beach. I really am just here to answer any questions. I think it's pretty straightforward.
Is there any questions? Mr. Feller?
Just one, and it basically, when I read through all the different staff reviews and comments, there was a lot of commentary in there, so your client will obviously be taking all of this into consideration. Hopefully won't be seeing them for variances and other things in the future, since
No,
it seems like
we've
it was
already, actually,
outlined
the
pretty
plan
well.
that you're seeing has already dealt with all of that. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to speak to this case? We have one request from a Mr. Greg Pfeiffer.
Good morning to y'all. How are you? I am...
Excuse me, sir. Would you give your name and address for the record, please?
I was getting ready to do this. My name is Greg Pfeiffer. I'm president of AG Pfeiffer Construction Company. And I am a property owner to the north, directly next to this property, and been there since 1996. which I've expanded my company over 33 years, not just in that location. However, I do have a couple concerns with this planned unit development. I am somewhat versed in development, so I've been a general contractor for quite a bit. This property came about into my office by a realtor a few years back, and they wanted to sell it to me because I was an adjoining property owner. Well, I didn't buy it for the simple reason of there was wetlands throughout this property, and not one mention of those wetlands has been brought up in any of these descriptions of this property, of the change of use. My other concern is with this planned urban development, I want to make sure that there's any way they could build a residential property next to me. I have a very small parcel, which I bought was conforming at the time when I bought it and when I built on it. But now it is under the half-acre requirement for a light industrial property. So I want to make sure that this, if approval happens, this does not cause any undue hardship to my adjoining property. Also, my other concern is the 34,500 square feet. Now, is that contiguous, or is it acceptable and go along with the High Ridge Estate plan, urban development plan that they've had in place for many years? I also own additional properties across 92, fairly close to this property, and I will be presenting within a few months my own change of zoning for my property. But I'm just concerned that this gateway to Daytona Beach is maintained in a very presentable way, and not something like some cities have, that we drive through a city and we see nothing but. I have a feeling that this owner I know fairly well. He's going to be very responsible, and he is going to put in attractive buildings. But that's something we also have to look at, because out there, that is our next form of development from the LPGA corridor, which is now, on a fast track to be developed. So basically, that's all my concerns. I just, again, am looking out for the property that I've developed over the years, in decades, I should say. And I've been a very productive businessman in this county. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Just a second. Mr. Feller.
Yeah, I do. I just want to make sure, when you said the change of use, this is a permitted use in its current format. It's just a change, the PD is required, just like that you have to, even if it was a permitted use on your land, you'd have to still do this PUD. So
Correct.
Just want to make sure we understand. But environmental permitting was brought into this. What you may not see it, but in our staff report, there's a lengthy discussion about environmental permitting, and it's what I spoke to the applicant about, is they understand that there's a lengthy bit of information from county staff and about what environmental permitting, code enforcement, and everything.
I understand that, but it was not mentioned.
It's not presented here, but
Okay.
it's definitely, and just so you know, it's literally pages 29 of 49 and 30 of 49, just from environmental. That's without, land development and others.
That information.
So I just wanted to mention that there. And then you said something about the size, and as I just go through in my head, this is a 6-acre parcel. So, I mean, that's 270,000 square feet, and this is.
But how many acres is wetlands?
Well, but again, it is, for lot coverage, it's not based on that. It's based on 270,000, correct, staff, that we have 270,000-ish square feet, and this 34,000 square feet would be under the 30%. So, again, wetlands, they'll do that when they do site plan. That's not our job, but it does meet those requirements of the under 30%. And again, in the light industrial, I think it would have no requirement for that. So just.
I thank you also for bringing something else up, services, infrastructure services. I know there's a water line on Old DeLand Road that is directly behind, is to the north of the property. But I'm not aware of if we're allowed to connect to the sewer system. That's something I think we need to also look at. It was under high pressure. I was not allowed to hook to it in 96 or in 2008 when I built my office building.
issues will be dealt with during the site plan review process and
Okay.
permitting.
Okay. All right, very good. That's all I have.
Yeah, are there any other
Questions
questions?
that I can help anyone?
No. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the chambers that would like to speak to this case? Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to close the public hearing for commission comments or a motion.
With a comment as well, too. In case PUD 22-063, I move that we forward the rezoning application to the county council for final recommendation, with the final recommendation of approval. I'd like to caveat that with, you know, I agree that development and hooking into the water is very important, and I hope that our staff does a lot when it comes to connecting, you know, utilities, and I know that they always look, you know, closely on that, but.
Can I interrupt just a minute, please? Mr. Feller, can we get your motion and it properly second, and then we'll have comments
Sounds good, yeah.
after that?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, now it's been properly moved and second. Now, comments, please.
Sorry, thank you so much, Chair, and I appreciate that. But yeah, my comments would be basically that, you know, I'm hoping that site planning and engineering does what they're supposed to do to make this right.
Yes, we'll need to look at those wetlands seriously.
This is located in the Daytona Beach service area, so it will go through them for permitting.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been.
And thank you, Chair, I'm sorry.
No problem. It's been moved by Mr. Feller. Mr. Young second the motion to approve, forward to the county council for final action and with a recommendation of approval for PUD 22063. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Ms. Shelley?
Yes, sir. Case number V-22-064, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on Resource Corridor, RC zoned property.
Good morning once again. Michael Hansen from Planning Development Services. The subject property is located at 1955 Taylor Road, Port Orange. It is on the south side of Taylor Street, or Taylor Road there, approximately 1,450 feet from the intersection with Tomoka Farms Road, which also known as County Road 415. Right now, we're looking at a variance to the minimum east side yard setback from 50 feet to 25 feet for a proposed detached garage. The lot is non-conforming RC. It's 5.51 acres, and the RC Resource Corridor zoning requires 20 acres. However, the parcel is lawful non-conforming. It was created as part of a final ruling in a court case that is known as 95-30431-CICI, which split it from the parcel to its immediate east. And it left this parcel, the subject parcel, split zoned as A2, RC, and RR. From the historical zoning, the A2 section would have been on the north side of the parcel, near where the house is currently and where the proposed garage would be. The RC portion was in the middle of the parcel, because that is a wetland area that is part of a tributary that feeds into the Spruce Creek. And then the RR portion, the rural residential, would have been on the south side near the neighborhood that is on the borders on the south side of the property. However, in a letter dated August 26th from 1996 from a former director of growth resource management, they acknowledged changing the zoning of the parcel to the of its entirety to RC would allow more flexibility as far as for a potential building site. So the parcel was administratively rezoned back in 1996 to make it entirely RC. So thus, because it's entirely RC, we're looking at 50-foot setbacks on the front side and rear property lines. Normally that would be imposed without any kind of variance. The subject property is located within the Tomoka Farms local plan area. It's currently used for a residence for the applicant's and his son. They both own the property in common ownership. Right now, the applicant's seeking a variance for the detached garage, which would be measured 40 feet by 60 feet, so 2,400 square feet, and that it'd be constructed at the end of, and you can kind of see on the photo there that shows the subject property from the north, January 2022. The detached garage, or otherwise where Susan's locating on the site plan, right there, at the basically the extension of the existing driveway. Now, this would site the garage 25 feet from the east property line. The main consideration for this location was to avoid the wetland area for the RC portion of the property, which is just south of the existing home site for where the house and fenced-in backyard is at. Now, it should be noted that this portion of the property where they're looking at trying to get this garage was zoned A2 historically when it was administratively rezoned RC. Had that not occurred, we would not be here today. The applicants would not need a variance because under the A2 zoning, 25 feet is the required setback for side yard setback. So we're here because we administratively rezoned it to RC back in 1996. Based on review of the criteria, found that it met criteria 1, 2, and 5. However, that it failed criteria 3 and 4. The special circumstances in this case, obviously, is that this parcel was created due to court action and the subsequent administrative rezoning. Neither of those application or circumstances were actions of the applicant, so they met criteria 1 and 2 in that aspect. However, reducing a side yard setback is not a common right enjoyed by people. So criteria 3 was failed, and as far as criteria 4, meeting the minimum variance necessary to make a reasonable use of the property, staff felt that failed as well. The property is already developed with an attached garage as is. Right now, they're asking for an additional detached garage that does impact the existing RC setback. So we considered that criteria 4 failed in that aspect. However, though, granting the variance is not likely to be injurious to the area, as the garage would be screened from view from the adjacent property by considerable tree and vegetation. It would allow the placement of the garage where it will minimize potential impacts to the on-site wetlands. Should the variance not be granted, the applicants theoretically could re-site the garage to a location further to the south of the property, meeting the actual setbacks. However, that would impact the wetlands. They'd have to go through for wetland mitigation permits. And so the purpose of the applicants is to try and avoid any impact to the wetlands. Now, this particular case, we did receive a substantial amount of public participation via emails. I did want to make everybody aware that in several of the emails, they talked about a proposed bridge located over the RC, over the tributary for feeding into Spruce Creek. This variance application does not have anything to do with a bridge at all. This is for a detached garage impacting the east property setback. So now, as far as the new property rights element aspect of our staff reports, staff did find that the variance implicates consideration 2, noting that the property owner does have the right to improve their property. However, the construction of the detached garage is subject to local ordinances, including the minimum yard requirements unless varied. Staff does not believe it implicates consideration 1, 2, or 3. The staff recommendation in this case was to deny variance 1, V22-064, as the variance failed 2 out of the 5 criteria for granting said variance. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Before we continue, I would like to just, for the record, let it be known that member Frank Costa has filed a Form 8B which is a memorandum of voting conflict. He will be participating in the discussion, but he will refrain from voting.
Yes.
Now, do we have any comments or questions for staff, Mr. Feller?
One question. Can you bring up page 21 of 30 on the slides? Because my question is, when this was A2, would the garage that, as depicted, be set in outside of the resource corridor? Is it, I mean, I'm trying to overlay, I mean, it looks like it is in the map that you've laid out here. Like, does it meet the 50-foot setback from wetlands where it is currently positioned? Do we know that it meets that 50-foot setback from the wetlands?
So where the actual garage is located at, having looked at and tried to line everything up from historical overlays considering the previous zoning, the house and the backyard and where the garage would potentially be fit within the A2 portion of the zoning classification, which would have a side yard setback of 25 feet. The RC portion is further south there, where, as Susan's highlighting over, and that's the area that would require the 50-foot. However, because of that letter that was by a former director of growth management resources, that they rezoned it administratively with a 660 lot line adjustment back in 1996. It was RC 0096. I forget the exact number off the top of my head. A, I think, and then that created the entire lot as RC zoned.
Okay, and again, I guess the only thing I'll say from my comments are, usually when it comes to the questions you get back from environmental permitting, it says we have no objection to this. This one pretty strongly says this falls within the natural resource management area, and these, has to be held to the highest standards, and it says they'll evaluate that during site plan stuff. So I just want to take into consideration that if we are going to approve this west side variance, or I'm sorry, east side variance, that's not where the wetlands are, right? I mean, where we're talking about right now.
So looking over our GIS mapping that we have for the delineated wetlands that I was able to see, it appears that the wetlands come in from the east side just under where this potential garage would be, and then they loop back up, kind of like this historical image showing the RC line, kind of in that fashion where it comes around and wraps around the house. But it does appear that the delineated wetlands that I saw look further south of where we're looking at.
It is possible that if we granted this variance to 25 feet, that environmental permitting would not approve their site plan for this. It's possible, I guess, is what I would say.
I think the question is, if they have to keep 50 feet from the wetland, nothing that this PLDRC can do can affect that. They'd have to keep 50 feet pursuant to NORMA, regardless of whether they grant the side setback variance to 25 feet.
That particular setback, they can mitigate for encroachments into it. We don't encourage that. It's expensive for them to have to mitigate it, but they can if they have to. My understanding, though, is that this has been placed so it meets that 50-foot setback as well as the 25 that they're requesting the variance for.
And for the commission, I think if you go on page 14 of 30, you'll have a survey that I believe has a jurisdictional wetland delineation.
That's the wetland jurisdiction. Okay, I see it.
Yeah, and otherwise, the permit that Susan was talking about, it's called a wetland mitigation permit. So yes, it is very costly, but if the variance isn't granted, they could theoretically try and site the garage within the zoning setbacks, but they would probably look at hitting that buffer and have to do a wetland mitigation permit.
Seems like moving it to the south would be the worst decision for the wetlands.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyone else like
movement as well to the south?
Costa?
Yes, movement to the south as well would impact several trees as well, if I remember right from these aerials.
Yes, it's very heavily wooded and a lot of vegetation.
Location is probably the less injurious to the land, per se.
That's my understanding.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you. Is the applicant present? And would you give your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Sarah Brown. I'm here representing Eric and Colin Olson for 1955 Taylor Road in Port Orange. I have a letter to read, if that's okay. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here today to express the situation on this property. I have the pleasure to represent Colin Olson and Eric Olson. Mr. Olson owns the property known as 1955 Taylor Road in Port Orange. The property sits on the south side of Taylor Road, and the current home sits on north of a small tributary of the Spruce Creek River. The property is approximately 5.5 acres of land, of which most is either a tributary to the Spruce Creek River or uplands, which are inaccessible from our current access point and easements. The current zoning for the property is RC and requires setbacks of 50 feet side setbacks from each side of the property. Previously, the construction of the single-family resident currently in place on the zoning of the property was a mixture of A2 as well as RC and RR. The area in which we are building the structure was zoned A2. A2 requires 25-foot side setback. The survey of the current property, which details the current layout of the existing home, as well as the proposed detached garage structure planned to be built on the property, none of which encroach into the sensitive areas of the water basin, nor its generous setbacks. The home, when constructed, was able to maintain a minimum of a 50-foot setback on both sides, but the addition of the garage storage structure, we humbly request a variance to locate the building with a 25-foot setback on one side of the structure. We are requesting this in order to maintain the building as far from the sensitive wetlands as possible, as well as save as many trees as possible. We have adjusted the location to numerous locations in order to find the best alternative, and this is what the final location is. The particular property is unique, as the properties would typically be zoned the A2, RR, or agriculture zoning classifications, all of which have the maximum size setback of 25 feet. Denial of the variance will result in an odd location, and adjustments would not be complementary to the individual home and lot. We would require to move the garage to a location that will require the removal of numerous trees, as well as move it close to the sensitive areas of the property, which we are trying to avoid. The past zoning of the property was A2 as well as RR, both of which 25 feet or less side setback requirements. The grant of this variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of Volusia County Comprehensive Plan, Ordinance Number 90/10, as amended, and that such variance will be injurious to the area involved. The general interest of the ordinance is to protect the setbacks from neighboring properties of much larger size and scope, of which neither are pertinent to the particular property. The property in question would more typically be zoned in a manner that includes 25-foot setback or less. The neighboring properties on all sides to the site enjoy the other mentioned zoning classifications, as well as stringent setbacks. And if granted, the variance will not be injurious to the area involved. We have read 2 letters from the neighboring properties that have expressed their opposition to the variance, as mentioned, but I believe they are completely misinterpreting the request we have here today. Both letters state we be impacting the waterway with a bridge or accessing the rear of the property that is separated by the tributary. There has also been discussions that we are looking to split the property into 5 lots. None of this is true. We are simply requesting the 25 side-foot setback so we can place the detached garage on our property as far away from the creek as possible and minimize any removal of the trees on the property. A denial will absolutely require us to move the garage closer to the sensitive areas of the property, as well as clear the trees, and is 100% allowable with our current zoning and ability without any approvals from the county. Approval of this variance ensures we are able to maintain a significantly larger setback from the sensitive areas. Thank you so much, and I respectfully hope you approve.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
I just have a comment that we have received multiple withdrawals from those people that said they received, and I know how things go when people start talking, but acknowledging that you are not.
Yes, ma'am.
As we all know, you're
Yes,
not
ma'am.
subdividing the lot.
No, ma'am.
So, but they have graciously sent in withdrawals of their objections.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm not sure exactly how they got that, but we're definitely not building a bridge. We're trying to protect that area as much as possible.
Thank you. Is there anyone in chambers that would like to speak to this case? Thank you so much. Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this case?
No, sir.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will close the public hearing and ask for commission comments or a motion.
I'll be glad to make a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair, before any vote is made, there are 5 of you who can vote. A grant of a variance will require approval of at least 4. So it's not majority rules this time. You need at least 4 of you to approve this variance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move that case number V-22-064, a variance to the minimum yard requirements on Resource Corridor RC zoned property be approved,
I'll
subject
second.
to the staff condition.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Shelley moves and Mr. Young seconds. Ms. Shelley made the motion and Mr. Young moved that we approve V-22-064. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's see. Are there any other public items?
No, sir.
Staff items?
No, sir, other than to say happy St. Patty's Day.
Where's the green beer?
I think we do have public, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I have one question
Just a
for
minute,
staff.
we're not, okay, we're not there yet. Staff comments?
I just wanted to make you all aware that we are going to be doing a growth management workshop. You can attend it virtually, or you can attend it in person. It'll be here. Well, I have on the training rooms, but I think it's going to be here.
It's here. We changed it. We used to do it at the training rooms for these workshops, but for recently we're accommodating the workshops in chambers here. So I believe it's April 12th, and it's going to be in the auditorium here.
Okay.
Do we have a time?
I believe it starts at 9 o'clock. It might last all day. I'm not sure what the end time is. So just wanted to make you aware of that and encourage you to attend and hear the council's concerns and possible direction that they may have going forward.
Thank you. Commission comments? Mr. Young?
I just, I've been here a while, but I never asked this question, but this review, when we have the site review, is that site review open to the neighbors to come and talk on it or anything, or have input on it?
The review portion isn't a public hearing, but when it goes to the Development Review Committee, that is considered a public hearing, and they can attend virtually or they could attend in person.
Okay. I never thought about it.
Yes. In fact, yesterday, which we had our DRC meeting, and I also advised that board, we did have one person, or a member of the public, who just attended. They just wanted to see how it functioned.
And the water quality workshop had a lot of public attendance too.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I was at that, yeah.
Anyone else?
Go ahead, no, go, please.
I'm kind of a final comment, but I was just going to say, great job, Mr. Vice Chair. Go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say, we're starting to see more and more, or we will be seeing more and more of these where there are multiple dwellings on the property. And with multi-generational families, I have no problem. I hesitated on this one only because of just a gut that I think we'll see them again down the road. The location lends itself very well for other uses besides 2 dwellings and multi-generational living. So I pass it probably 3 times a day, so I'll keep an eye on it. But yeah, I was just a little pause there. But we're going to see more of these, I think, as we go along.
I'd actually like to follow up on that.
Sale, is it right beside there? Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Feller?
I'd like to make a comment on that because accessory dwelling units are something that I am strongly too, and I think that I don't think that they were designed simply for. If you read what we passed on to the county for approval, was not just for multi-generational living. It was to allow seniors or other people to rent out their property in some fashion. And I think that depriving of those rights would be bad. I know that there's currently issues about short-term rentals and all that going on, and everybody knows I'm involved with that. But with that being said, I think that it's very clear that if an ADU is acceptable and it's on there and it falls within the use, whether we like it or not, that's what it comes down to. I don't think that they're just for multi-generational living. I think that they are, again, according to what we passed on to the county council, it started out with to allow seniors to possibly be able to stay in their home and rent a portion of it out. So I would just say that I think we should take it with every piece that comes forward, not just consider it as multi-generational. But that's just my take on it.
Any more comments from the commission? Press or citizen comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I need to fill out a sheet, which she just informed me, which I'll do. My name is Suzanne Schreiber. I live in Ormond Beach, Florida, and I lead an environmental group in Volusia County.
Can you give us an address, please?
I can. A lot of times I don't like to because I have a lot of
You don't
people
like eggs.
who don't care for me. 548 Sandy Oaks Boulevard, Ormond Beach. So last year, the state legislators passed $400 million to fund conservation in the wildlife corridor, and that is through the entire state. The wildlife corridor runs through the middle of the state, and it also runs through Volusia County. $300 million came from ARPA funds, and $100 million was from the state itself. So collectively, $400 million. So this is a willing seller program, and it actually is completely separate from Volusia Forever. It is not a matching funds program the way Volusia Forever is. So unfortunately, so when you think about the wildlife corridor, about 53% is protected in Volusia County. This is actually staff's percentage, not my own, made up. They said this in another meeting. So when you think of 47% not being protected, please think of that in the terms of larger wildlife, like bears, panthers, bobcats, things like that. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't care about wildlife. So let's talk about what else is in the wildlife corridor. Our aquifer is in it, and a lot of our food is grown in it. So why would I stand here and tell this planning committee all this? You have an enormous impact with what you approve in the wildlife corridor. Everything from our water to wildlife to where our food is grown and so forth. And connectivity is very important. And we have lost some connectivity in our county. And our county, so you know, is one of the key parts of Florida if you look at the wildlife corridor map. So when you make decisions, as was announced, the growth management program workshop is coming. Every decision you make makes a difference. And another reason I'm telling you this is a lot of the public in general does not even know what I just told you. They don't know what Volusia Forever is, even though they voted for it, and they've never heard of the wildlife corridor, and they don't know that $400 million was passed in funding. So I appreciate your time, and please use what I just told you, and possibly, if it's within your realm, even ask staff for a map of the wildlife corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online that would like to make a comment?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Until 4 in the morning. No need for heating that one.
Go ahead. Take it.
How's life treating you? All right, everything good? Yeah, can't complain. Good. Everything's good. Yeah, we can get some more rain now. What about your way? It's been flooding me.
I've had a fence on hold, replacement fence we took down, and it's basically, it's right in the middle of, it's a dividing line between me and Ronnie's place.
Yeah.
And every time it rains, it's just, the guy to the west of us,
Yeah.
filled in quite a bit.
Yeah.
Now all the water that used to be on his place
Is on yours?
it rolls down.
Oh, that's
Mostly it's
nice.
most of it's on Ronnie's, but
Yeah.
But you know, it just goes down because everything flows out to
Right.
415. So
Right, it does, yeah. Oh, boy.
Is what it is.
It is.
It's Sam Sewell, right?
Yep.
Mr. Bender?
Yes, sir.
We'll see you the next time around.
All right, enjoy the rest of your day.
We moved through it all faster than I thought we would.
Yeah.